Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Cara Puccinelli. I'm the Chief Client Officer at Nexxen. Nexxen is an advertising platform that uses data and media to drive better outcomes for marketers. And I'm thrilled to have our two guests join us today. We have Noa here from Mistplay as the SVP of Marketing, and Pete Harrison, who's a consultant and has worked with many brands, likely many of you that are in similar roles helping guide on strategies. And today we're going to talk about CTV, but more specifically, we're going to dive deeper on strategy. And I know for those of you that have joined many of the sessions throughout the day, there's been a lot of really great takeaways. I think when you walk out of the room today, we want you to have some really practical and tactical ways to approach CTV, but even more importantly, how to approach incrementality tied to CTV. So I'll start off, Noa, with you. If you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me and Pete. My name is Noa Gutterman. As Carrie said, I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Mistplay. If you're unfamiliar with Mistplay or you're not a gamer, we're one of the leading rewarded gaming platforms. So you join our platform, you play all the games you know and love, you earn gift cards for doing so. I have worked in mobile UA for the last probably 13 years at this point. I live here in Brooklyn, New York, and when I'm not working, I love to eat. I love to shop. So if you're in New York City and you're ever looking for a buddy to do that with, just hit me up after this.
Best city to do that in, yes. And Pete, tell us a little about you.
Hey everybody, Pete Harrison, a former head of marketing, now advisor, have worked with a lot of companies on their media and also TV. And yes, eating and shopping, but on the West Coast, Sonoma, so all those things.
Arguably the second best place to eat, definitely to eat and drink. Okay, so I'm going to start, Pete, with you, obviously having a lot of experience across many verticals and brands that you've advised. You know, many brands think of CTV as a branding channel. How do you use CTV from a performance perspective, and what type of brands and verticals does it work well with?
Yeah, most of my clients tend to start performance first, brand second. And I think it's always strange, like the variety of clients I have, like right now, Skylight and Squarespace, Carter's Kids Clothes and Calci Prediction Markets, Thrive Groceries, and Ramp Business Receipts, right? Like the point of sharing all those is like a TV can work for B2C and B2B and a lot of things that are sort of in between.
Great. And Noa, I know for you, obviously, being at Mistplay and being a mobile gaming app, it's not what you typically think when you think about brands that invest a lot in CTV. A lot of those brands, when you think of are, the larger CPG brands of the world, the brands that have spent a lot on television. How has CTV worked for you, and how have you proved the performance?
Absolutely. I think Pete and I would probably agree that any channel can work. It depends on your audience, your creative, your targeting, and how you assess its efficacy. When I joined Mistplay, I had never worked in gaming before. I'm not a big gamer myself. Yeah. And so I spent the first couple of months really trying to figure out who our audience was. I read every App Store and Play Store review. I read every comment on Reddit. I was in all these Facebook groups for gamers trying to learn what people thought about different brands and really try to understand our audience. And while many people think about gaming, they think, a 25-year-old dude in his mom's basement playing on like 3 screens. Those are not our customers. Our customers are women between the ages of 35 and 65 who often live in rural and suburban America, who play games in their idle time, when they're waiting in the doctor's office for their kids, when they're at night watching reality TV on their big screen while they look at their small screen. And those people watch a lot of connected television. Mm-hmm. And so starting audience first, we were really able to carve out with Tinuiti and with Nexxen an opportunity to get these users outside of bottom of funnel performance digital channels like Facebook or Google. We started pretty small with some fast networks, Tubi, Roku, Hulu, and we've really been able to scale it up. It now represents about 25-30% of our total media mix every month.
Wow, that's great. And I know, Pete, for you, there is a lot of different types of brands, including B2B, that you've guided on CTV strategies. And I'm sure there's people in the room that, work on B2B as well. So can you talk about what are some of the differences in strategy for CTV for that type of vertical?
Yeah. B2B clients, ClickUp, Ramp, Square. and others, I think it all comes back to targeting, right? I think a big unlock for CTV is that in the old days with linear, we had shows and Dayparts, right? And with CTV, it's almost infinite how much targeting there is. You mentioned a number of them, right? But first-party data, third-party data. Not the session this morning with Pepsi, I thought was great, right? It's not just demographics, but personal interests and what people are shopping for. Geo-targeting. I've had a lot more clients in the last few years that launch in a bunch of markets first before they go national. So I think the B2B answer is the B2C answer, which is it's all about targeting.
Yeah.
And you can zero in an audience even if it's relatively small. You'll just spend less money, but you want to put your dollars against that audience. So it's a big advantage of CTV.
Yeah, agree. Targeting being the first step, but I want to go back to what you mentioned, Noah, which is really creative. And I think often we talk a lot about how things are done, but not as much as, what we're going to see and what that experience is for the viewing consumer. And I imagine being a brand like Mistplay, creative for CTV was a big undertaking. And as I know it is for many brands, there's a lot that goes into it. How do you define what's going to be a good CTV creative? What does that process look like?
I think a lot of marketers I've talked to about CTV, a lot of rooms I've been in, creative is always the rate limiter because people think you have to make these gigantically expensive, crazy high production value spots. And I actually don't think that's not always wrong. We're actually going to look at two creatives that we made at Mistplay. One is very high production value, cost a non-insignificant amount of money. We shot in a studio. We used a production company. And then we're going to look at another one that actually we did because we run sweepstakes at Mistplay. So rather than cashing your points out for gift cards, you can cash out your points for a chance to win a sweepstakes. This was a program that I actually created when I started at Mistplay because in all those comments that I read that I was telling you about, people were saying they wanted bigger amounts of money. And I totally get that. $50 is great, but $5,000 is a lot better. And so we started our sweepstakes program. We now have built it up to be this big thing. We travel the country. We go to our winners' houses, just like Publishers Clearinghouse, if anybody in the room is familiar with that reference. And we show up at their door with a giant check, and we film it. And
Very cool.
Yeah, so we're going to look at...
Let's take a look.
Perfect. I think this is our high production value first.
Hey, Debbie!
New sunglasses?
I got them with my Mistplay rewards.
Mistplay rewards.
I play games and earn points that I can use to cash out gift cards to all my favorite stores.
You get gift cards for playing games on your phone?
Not only gift cards, but I also enter sweepstakes where I can win all sorts of prizes.
How much is it to join?
It's free.
Free?
Just download the app and start earning rewards.
Earn rewards for what you love, just by playing your favorite games. Download now.
So that was our high production value spot. Spent a lot of money, built a set, did Christmas decor, the whole nine. Now let's look at the really cheap one.
I've been playing Mistplay for probably about 5 or 6 years. Mistplay is a mobile app where you can gain points from downloading different games. When I use my points on Mistplay, I like to cash them in for Amazon gift cards. Sometimes I just have the money sent to my PayPal. When I saw the sweepstakes for $20,000, I really thought, well, that's a sweepstakes I can get behind. I think that I will go ahead and enter. And if I can win, anybody can win.
So just to show you kind of the range, one of those cost less than $10K to produce, and one of them cost a lot more than that to produce, and both work in different ways and for different channels. So I really think you can get started. Maybe not everybody's going to people's houses, but I think there are really low-cost ways to get started with creative.
Yeah, I would ditto that. It seemed five years ago, it was always spend $300,000 on the creative before you get started. And I think it kept a lot of people away from CTV. Never do that now. It's always reusing social or YouTube assets. Just like that, you got to show the product, you got to connect with your customer, right? And you got to show the brand somewhere for them to go. I'll also add that I've got my first two clients with 100% AI produced creative. Kalshi and Replit just rolled out AI ads. They're live action, and it's hard to tell the difference. So I think that'll be a big change this year as a lot of people experiment with AI-produced video as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring back a point you touched on, which is social. And I think, for many of the marketers in the room, social is a big part of their investment, right? And, we've proven how channels like Meta work. I think there's still a lot of challenges for people to determine performance in CTV. So, Pete, I'd love for you to share, how do you approach, looking at performance in CTV, especially when you're looking at comparisons to other channels?
Yeah, it's pretty simple for me. I always tell clients to expect whatever their social results are, that's what the CTV results should be. There are a bunch of reasons for that. The CTV rates are in the $5 to $15 CPM range. That's probably lower than your Meta rates. There's targeting on both sides. Probably give the edge in targeting to Meta, right? But it's similar. And then Meta's skippable video and CTV is mostly not skippable video. So it's kind of reasonable to see how the outcomes, whether it's a cost per or ROAS, are actually pretty similar. And it normally nets out that way. So I think it's also, to your point, a really easy way to get started and think about it. There's not some lofty brand goal here that we have to hit that's difficult to measure, especially at a low test spend, but just look at the performance metrics that you get from social and try to hit those first.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, performance is the first step of it, but we know the holy grail is really incrementality. And I think all of us are sitting in the room today because we have some relationship with Tinuiti, who's really leading the way on how they approach incrementality. And Nexxen is proud to be a partner that helps support that. And I think it's a really important component for how marketers justify media dollars, right? Because you've got to be able to go to your CFO and your CMOs and really determine how you get more media. So Noa, I'd love for you to share, how do you approach securing more media to CTV, and how does incrementality play a role in that?
I think it's almost harder for mobile apps than it is for web-based companies or CPG because the data is so spotty and it's gotten so much worse in the last 5 years. For us, measurement is never one answer from one platform. It's all about triangulating different data points for us. So at Mistplay, we use basically 4 data points. We've got data we get through the MMP. We use AppsFlyer. We can pass basically impression level logs for some networks that we run on through CTV from Tinuiti right to AppsFlyer. That gives us like one read. We've got the Tinuiti database, which is phenomenal. We've got incrementality testing. We run both geo-based and holdout testing. And then lastly, we actually ask our players, where did they hear about us? It's part of our onboarding. 10% of everybody who comes into Mistplay gets a little onboarding survey that says, where did you hear about us? And we triangulate those 4 data sources and compare them, ideally pretty frequently, to really get at a range for how much attribution credit we should give to each network. It's a little imprecise, but it's a lot better than just using one source and hoping that it's going to be right when it's probably not right. And interestingly, our users, we think, are actually the closest to the real ground truth versus any of those other data platforms. But it's really helpful to get all of those inputs together to put a range of answers in front of our CFO.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, those are the things.
Yeah.
I think some clients are in too much of a rush to get to incrementality and don't ground the attribution and measurement. Tinuiti actually does a good job of being transparent and allowing you to take all the CTV matches and back out all your other paid channels. And that direct attribution is a really good starting point because it gives you a sense of how incremental it is. Everything Noa said, you can take a data platform like Nexxen and do ghost bidding and lift analysis on a network by network basis. And then I think the last thing I would add is an MMM. This is, I feel like 5 or 10 years ago, I never heard of MMMs, and now I've got every client desperate to roll out their MMM. And I think the holdout tests feed an MMM, and the combination of the two are super powerful, not just for CTV, but for all your channels. So I think there's at least 5 things there.
Yeah.
And so whatever, it's not a triangle. We triangulate the pentagon, I guess. Yeah. But yeah.
I know, Pete, for many people in the room, they're probably thinking, how do I get started with something like this? And if you mentioned there's a lot of different approaches you can take, maybe you can just double click a little more on those approaches. How do you guide marketers towards ultimately getting to the quantification they want, which is this really driving incremental outcomes for the business?
Yeah, I'd say the key things to be thinking about, we talked about targeting, rates, and measurement. I think those are three key things to be thinking about. When it gets to the test, it should feel like a performance test. That's probably for 6 weeks. If it's a national spend, that probably looks like $50K a week. It could be a geo spend and be $25K a week, but it's probably something like that. It's not a good idea to run a 2 or 4 week test because you won't have any time to optimize the media. It's much better to spend less and run it longer, so you have some weekly cycles to optimize the results. You'll need someone on your team who has a performance background. They don't need to have a TV background. And you're running a performance test, and you're looking at like we talked about before, the attributed outcomes, and then as much of the other measurement systems that you have in place to help triangulate that result.
Great.
But yeah, 6 to 8 week test.
Yeah. And Noah, I'm sure you've had a lot of learnings along the way as you've approached measurement, you've approached the concept of incrementality. Any learnings you feel like this group could take away from things that went well, didn't go well, asks you now have of partners maybe that you learned along the journey?
I think the biggest learning I would share, and I feel like this is such a hot take, but hopefully this lands well with the people in this room, Google is always giving more credit than it deserves to itself.
Shocking.
I always, every time I've joined a new company, I've said, you're spending too much on Google, cut it in half. So that's always the first test I want to run. And from there, it's like, okay, what other upper to mid funnel channels are having an impact that Google is then stealing the credit for, and trying to work backwards from there is like probably the hottest tip I'd give.
That's great. Pete, what would you advise when you advise your clients? Like, what should they be asking their platform partners and media partners to get the right outcomes for these types of measurement solutions?
Yeah, I think transparency on data and measurement, I'd probably put at the top of the list. Access to a lot of inventory and targeting at low rates is super important. Don't walk in the door and force, we want to run on Netflix and Prime and that's it, right? Like run 10 or 20 options and see what the best outcomes are. Run across all the devices. You may come in with a perception that you should be on CTVs, and then you're a mobile app company and you realize that being on mobile phones is actually quite beneficial, right? So just keep an open mind early on.
Yeah.
I think the other thing is, I think it's related to this, is just sometimes you have to sell this in internally. Like a lot of people will think, oh, TV, we're not ready for that. This is the world of branding and linear TV. And we are talking digital video advertising, right? It's targeted and measurable. It shouldn't have this like big sort of elephant tied to it.
Yeah.
And a year ago this month, Nielsen finally measured that there were more people in the US watching streaming than linear. So that chart of linear TV declining, and streaming increasing.
That's a big, yeah.
We actually crossed
Wow.
it a year ago. And so it's a big channel, and you should at some point see if it makes sense for your company.
So I know everyone here is, thinking now about their strategies and connecting some of the points, but I'd love to just wrap up with, what is 1 or 2 takeaways you want everybody to walk out of the room here with? What are things that you think are most important starting a CTV strategy, but even more importantly, proving that that works?
I would say the best take I would give is take your top performing creative from Meta, put a specific promo offer on it with a code you can track and a link you can track, get it live on at least one free ad supported network, hopefully 10 or 20, and see what happens from there.
Yeah, and I would say engage your data team, whatever that looks like, whether it's one analyst or you have data scientists, whatever that team is, I would engage them early to understand it, because once they look under the hood on this, it's going to be not what many of them experienced with linear TV, and actually quite measurable and transparent. So it's a case where the data team can actually be helpful in your allies and running a good test and seeing if it's incremental and moving ahead.
That's great. Well, Noah and Pete have offered to take questions from the group, so I'd love to open it up to anybody who has a question for them.
What do you feel about creative fatigue? Like with CTV, we have one brand spot running for a long time, and I'm always like, do we need to refresh this? And everybody's like, no, it's fine. What do you guys have a sense of that? Is it better to refresh, or you're fine keeping the same message in market?
Yeah, I think it's a great platform to test creative. So big clients, big brands will be running 50 to 100 spots at a time. That's common, right? Because the precision's so good, you can run that many evergreen stuff, seasonal, and then new tests, and really kind of iterate and improve. There's no, like on Meta, the algorithm degrades the creative pretty quickly, right? That doesn't exist on CTV. So the studies that I've done with Tinuiti at a couple large clients had that degradation happening at like $3 to $5 million on a spot. So that's a pretty big budget. If you're spending that much, you're going to be running a few spots. So I think a spot has a lot of runway, but it doesn't mean you should just ride it, right?
And then you said, like, what about quality of that creative? Like, do you think you need a higher quality for CTV, or?
I mean, I think it depends on what your audience is open to taking, right? Typically, older folks want more traditional looking, higher quality stuff. Typically, younger folks are a little more okay with what trends on TikTok, lower quality, lower fi, social first stuff. We have kind of a slightly older demographic. I showed you 2 spots. One of them is Christmas themed. We've been running that since August.
Yeah.
Wow.
Still hasn't fatigued. Now, I will say Christmas is a holiday that probably is the most resilient to fatigue, because who doesn't love Christmas? But it's funny, every week when we meet with our Tinuiti team, we're like, hey, is that spot still doing okay? Like, it's really Christmas themed. And they're like, no, it's doing great. We're totally fine. So we have just recently shot some new ads. But I think just to answer your question on fatigue, it really depends on the audience and the channel.
And quality-wise, there's not a correlation between how much you spent on the spot and how well it does. And it can be really frustrating, right, when a company and a brand team roll out a whole series of new spots to replace all the existing creative. And the way you should do that is roll in the new spots and A/B against the existing. And it is very common to have the existing spots, that annoying explainer that was never meant to be rolled out, right, continue to outperform the new brand spots, right? But there are lessons there. What are the elements of that explainer that are working, and how do you take the brand story and blend it together with the explainer? So, yeah, I would try a lot of different things, all the different formats. Kind of anything goes at this point. I think 5 years ago on TV, it all felt like the same TV ad. There was like almost a template for it. And now it's just wildly different. Yeah. Yeah.
A follow-up question on the creative. Hi. With linear, it was always, I don't know, for performance creative, it was like problem solution, where the product was the hero or the service was the hero. With CTV, the viewer has much more control over that viewing experience. Do you think the creative should be built differently, where you're pulling forward perhaps either the solution or the brand earlier? Because on linear, you don't have that. You know, the viewer can't play with the message time, but with CTV you can. And I've always had this struggle being on the media side with my creative team saying they just want to run the same linear spot on CTV, but I said, well, the experience or the control is now different. I was wondering on your take on that.
I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I think with creative for CTV, it matters less now about problem solution framing, because that was like so big in like 2016. Like that was what everybody was doing. I think now it's more about making creative that fits with the viewing experience that viewer is getting in the channel or in the show they're watching. So I will give you an example. We are trying to break into a little bit more of a male demographic this summer, get a little bit more RPG hardcore gamers. And so we just filmed a spot that looks like a sports broadcast, because we're going to run it during sports broadcast, and it's going to feel like the same vibe and tone and like energy of the show they were just watching, so that when it goes into ad, it doesn't feel like a jarring experience. What do you think about that?
Yeah, problem, solution first. I've seen them both work. You should just test them side by side and see. But totally, I think there's a point here that maybe ties a couple points together, which is with all the targeting options, and I don't even think I have a client who's like using all the possible options or has tested through all the options yet. What you want to do is find out what audiences work, and then customize the creative to each of those audiences. And some clients have leaned into that, but that's, it takes a while to get there, right? Get the measurement squared away, get the media squared away, often scale up, right? And then find your targets and then say, okay, let's do creative for each of the targets. But in theory, you can control what creative goes to what media and to what audience, and really start to customize, beyond gender, but to specific situations and scenarios and what they might be shopping for, and even regions of the country is pretty doable too. So.
Did you have a question? Yes.
I did. On the topic of creative, you mentioned that you've seen some success using AI produced creative. So I was wondering if you had any recommendations for vendors or platforms that produce good creative.
Yeah, they're not strong recommendations because it's all so new. I've seen work from Airpost, Absurd, and Genre, all AI agencies, I believe, all based here in New York. When I say agencies, they're 5, 10, and 15 people, right? They're using the available tool set to create AI video. I'm sure other agencies, all agencies, are thinking and applying the same tools. So there are a few. I think it's a good idea to be looking at a lot of creative and seeing what sort of fits your brand and your story, and then back into, believe me, those agencies are promoting it on their websites, back into who produced that and see if there's a fit there. But then it's certainly a polarizing question, right? Like, people have strong opinions on AI creative, and it's certainly much cheaper. But I think the bigger benefit might be the ability to iterate so quickly on so many different targeting, the production of so many different targeted spots. And then potentially we're on stage a year from now when I don't say large clients are running 50 to 100 spots, but possibly they're running 1,000 spots, right? And I think that's what Meta and Google are essentially maybe quietly doing, right? The personalized creative. And I think CTV would go in the same direction because it should just perform better.
That's it. We are at time. Noa, Pete, thank you for joining us. I think everybody walked away with some really good insights on your strategies. So thank you for the time.
Yeah, and we're both around. Ask questions
Yes.
if you want to.